The xenobiologists aboard the Galactic Council's research vessel, Eternal Curiosity, had studied thousands of species across countless worlds. But none had ever made senior researcher Valera's scales bristle quite like humans. She stood behind the observation window, watching the sole human representative they'd brought aboard for initial contact protocols. Dr. Sarah Chen sat calmly in the quarantine chamber, seemingly unbothered by conditions that would have most species begging for relief. The temperature fluctuated wildly between extremes, atmospheric pressure shifted unpredictably, and the gravity alternated between crushing force and near weightlessness. Fascinating, Valera whispered, her inner eyelids clicking rapidly as she made notes. Subject shows no signs of distress despite environmental variations that would incapacitate most carbon-based life forms. Her assistant, Zix 427, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses, flickered anxiously. Senior researcher, the human's vital signs. They're impossible. Valera moved closer to the bioratings. Her assistant was right. According to their instruments, the human's body was actively adapting to each new condition, making microscopic adjustments to maintain homeostasis. It wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Run the cognitive tests again, Valera ordered, her scientific curiosity overriding the instinctive unease these readings caused. Inside the chamber, Dr. Chen was solving complex mathematical equations while simultaneously tracking multiple moving objects and responding to verbal queries in 3 different languages. Senior researcher, Zix 427, pulsed urgently. The human is performing these tasks while experiencing conditions that should render complex thought impossible. The mental acuity actually increases under stress. Valera's scales shifted from their normal iridescent blue to a pale gray, a sign of deep concern among her species. She'd studied the preliminary reports from Earth, of course. A death world by any reasonable definition. Extreme temperature variations, high gravity, significant radiation exposure, and an atmosphere thick with corrosive oxygen. But seeing the effects of such an environment on its dominant species firsthand was different. The chamber door hissed open, and Dr. Chen stepped out, adjusting her simple cloth uniform. That was interesting, she said with a smile that revealed her omnivorous teeth. Though I should mention your gravity simulators need calibration. The fluctuations weren't quite smooth enough to be challenging. Valera forced her scales to remain still, maintaining scientific objectivity. Dr. Chen, you just endured conditions that would kill most sentient species. How do you feel? A bit hungry, actually. Do you have any coffee? Our Earth supplies are running low, and caffeine helps me focus. Zix 427 flickered in patterns that indicated confusion. You wish to consume a neurotoxin to improve concentration. Well, yes. Dr. Chen shrugged. It's not really toxic to us. More like a mild stimulant. Humans have a long history of adapting various environmental toxins for our benefit. Valera exchanged light patterns with her assistant before continuing. Dr. Chen, we've studied your species' historical records. Your people deliberately consume small amounts of poisons to build immunity. You voluntarily expose yourselves to high temperatures for relaxation. You intentionally damage muscle tissue to strengthen it. Your young engage in recreational activities that risk bodily harm. Why? Dr. Chen's expression shifted to what Valera's xenological training identified as thoughtful amusement. Because we can. Because it's interesting. Because humans have always pushed boundaries to see what's possible. It's how we survived on Earth. And it's how we'll thrive among the stars. The casual confidence in her voice sent a shiver through Valera's scales. Here was a member of a species that treated deadly conditions as mere inconveniences, that deliberately sought out ways to test their limitations, that viewed adaptation not as a multi-generational evolutionary process, but as something that could be achieved within a single lifetime. One final question, Dr. Chen. Your species' response to isolation and monotony. Our studies suggest it causes severe psychological distress. Yet you volunteered for this solo contact mission. How do you manage? Oh, that's simple. I imagine, I create, I solve puzzles in my head. Humans are never really alone because we carry entire universes in our minds. We can entertain ourselves with nothing but our thoughts for hours. She paused, then added with another unsettling smile, "Did you know some humans voluntarily isolate themselves in darkness for days just to see what happens to their consciousness? We're curious about everything, especially our own limitations." Valera's report to the Galactic Council later that day was brief but urgent. Humanity represents an unprecedented evolutionary paradigm. They do not merely adapt to their environment. They adapt their environment to themselves while simultaneously forcing themselves to adapt to ever greater challenges. They appear to be in a constant state of voluntary evolution, deliberately exposing themselves to adverse conditions to provoke adaptation. Most concerning, they appear to enjoy this process. She hesitated before adding the final line. Recommendation: classify Earth as a restricted zone. Not to protect humanity from the galaxy, but to protect the galaxy from humanity's influence until we can better understand the implications of their presence among us. These beings don't just survive, they weaponize survival itself into a form of advancement we have never encountered. As she filed the report, Valera watched through the observation window as Dr. Chen calmly sipped her coffee while reading a text on advanced xenobiology. The human had requested the most complex material available, citing boredom with simpler texts. Valera's scales rippled with unease as she realized humanity might represent something entirely new in the galaxy, a species that had evolved beyond mere survival to make adversity itself into a tool for advancement. The galaxy, Valera realized, would never be the same once these beings fully emerged from their death world. The question wasn't whether humanity would adapt to galactic civilization, but whether galactic civilization could adapt to humanity. The Centennial Galactic Innovation Summit was meant to showcase the finest technological achievements from across known space. Instead, it became the day the galaxy learned another terrifying truth about humans. Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez stood before the judging panel, his makeshift device looking almost primitive next to the sleek innovations presented by other species. The Arxian delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, spoke first. "Human Rodriguez, you cannot seriously intend to enter this compilation of salvaged parts in the emergency survival technology category. The other entries represent centuries of refined engineering." Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening as he smiled. "With respect, Ambassador, the brief was to create something that could save lives in a catastrophic shipboard failure. I built this from parts you'd actually find on a damaged ship." The panel exchanged troubled looks. The competition had attracted quantum-engineered survival suits, automated rescue pods, and even experimental stasis technology. Yet this human had entered what appeared to be little more than rebuilt scraps. "Demonstrate," ordered the Arxian, their crystalline form pulsing with skepticism. Marcus nodded to his assistant, who activated a holographic simulation of a catastrophic ship breach. Standard emergency scenarios focus on maintaining optimal conditions for survival. But humans learned long ago that optimal isn't always possible. Sometimes you have to survive in the gaps between disaster and rescue. He activated his device, and the watching crowd gasped as it began reconfiguring itself, transforming salvaged air processors into makeshift pressure regulators, repurposing damaged power cells into emergency heating units, and converting standard shipboard materials into crude but effective radiation shielding. "The key isn't building perfect solutions," Marcus explained as his creation continued to adapt. "It's understanding how to make imperfect pieces work together. Every part has multiple functions. Every failure point has a backup made from something else. It's not pretty, but it keeps you alive." The Halaxian representative, an arachnid-like being known for their engineering prowess, leaned forward. "You designed this to be deliberately unstable, to break down and be rebuilt." "Of course," Marcus said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Because that's what happens in real emergencies. Equipment fails. Systems break. The trick isn't preventing failure. It's making failure work for you. He gestured to the simulation, where his device was now creating breathable air from chemical reactions between common shipboard materials. Every component is designed to fail in ways that enable other functions. The heat from a power cell burnout helps catalyze the backup air processing. The radiation shielding doubles as thermal insulation. Even the waste products become useful. The panel watched in stunned silence as the simulation progressed through increasingly devastating scenarios. Marcus's device never maintained optimal conditions, but it consistently kept its theoretical occupants alive through situations that should have been unsurvivable. This isn't just engineering, the Archean observed, their crystalline form flickering with disturbance. This is evolution in machine form. Marcus shrugged. Humans have always understood that survival isn't about being the strongest or most advanced. It's about being able to work with whatever you have. We call it adaptive engineering, designing things that can be broken down and rebuilt in multiple ways. The Halaxian's chelicera clicked rapidly. But the psychological impact, to rely on equipment designed to fail, is far less damaging than death, Marcus completed. Humans don't fear imperfect solutions. We fear not having options. This gives options. Always. The judging panel conferred in hushed tones, their discussion more heated than any in recent memory. Finally, the Archean addressed the assembly. The prize for emergency survival technology is awarded to Chief Engineer Rodriguez. However, we must append a notation. This technology represents a fundamental paradigm shift in survival engineering that raises significant ethical questions about the nature of technological advancement. After the ceremony, the Halaxian approached Marcus privately. Your species troubles me, human. You don't design technology to prevent disaster. You design it to embrace disaster and redirect it. This is not natural. Marcus's smile carried a hint of pride. On Earth, we learned early that you can't always prevent disasters, but you can learn to dance with them. Every human child knows the story of the reed and the oak tree. The oak breaks in the storm while the reed bends and survives. Your species brings this philosophy to everything, the Halaxian observed. You don't seek perfection. You seek adaptability. Perfection is fragile, Marcus replied, packing up his device. Adaptability is robust. In an emergency, I'll take robust over perfect every time. The Halaxian watched him leave, then immediately composed an urgent message to their homeworld. Humans do not approach technology as we do. They create tools that evolve through failure, systems that become stronger through breakdown. Most disturbing, they seem to take satisfaction in this approach. Recommend immediate review of all human engineering principles. They are not just surviving differently. They are redefining the very nature of survival. In the days that followed, Marcus's design was studied by engineering teams across the galaxy, but none could quite replicate its effectiveness. Because what they failed to understand was that the true innovation wasn't in the device itself. It was in the human capacity to see potential in breakdown, opportunity in disaster, and possibility in the midst of chaos. The galaxy had already feared human physical adaptability. Now they had reason to fear human intellectual adaptability as well. For what could stand against a species that had turned failure itself into a tool for success? Deep Space Station Nexus 7 was considered the pinnacle of multi-species engineering, a triumph of collaborative design that accommodated beings from across the galaxy, which made its current crisis all the more shocking. Station Director Lyrax, a bioluminescent entity evolved from deep-sea creatures, stared at the emergency displays with all four of her eyes. How long until complete structural failure? 17 standard hours, replied the station's eye. The quantum fracture in the core is spreading faster than predicted. Standard containment procedures are failing. The assembled emergency response team, representing 12 different species, shifted uncomfortably. None of their evacuation protocols had accounted for a failure of this magnitude. With 30,000 beings aboard, and the nearest rescue vessels 40 hours away, The situation was beyond their experience. Then Lieutenant Hannah Collins spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're looking at this wrong. We don't need to prevent the structural failure. We need to use it." The room fell silent. Hannah was the station's only human officer, part of an exchange program meant to integrate Earth into the galactic community. Now, every alien eye focused on her with a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. "Explain," Lyrax commanded, her skin pulsing with urgent colors. Hannah moved to the holographic display, her movements precise despite the increasing gravitational fluctuations. "The quantum fracture is generating massive energy. Instead of fighting it, we can redirect that energy to power a station-wide emergency teleport." "Impossible," declared Chief Scientist Vexcor, his crystalline form vibrating with disagreement. "The power requirements would tear the station apart before the teleport activated." "Exactly," Hannah said, smiling in a way that made several species instinctively back away. "We use the station's own destruction as the power source. Time the teleport to execute at the exact moment of structural failure." The room erupted in protests. The idea violated every safety protocol, every engineering principle the galaxy had developed over millennia. But Hannah was already programming calculations into the system, her fingers flying over multiple interfaces simultaneously. "This is madness," Vexcor insisted. "You're proposing we deliberately accelerate the station's destruction." "No," Hannah corrected, never taking her eyes off the calculations. "I'm proposing we surf the wave of destruction to safety. Humans have been doing this for centuries, turning disasters into opportunities, using the energy of failure to power success." Lyrax moved closer, her bioluminescence shifting to patterns indicating deep thought. "The psychological impact on the station's population. To know we're deliberately causing the destruction will be less than the impact of death," Hannah finished. "Trust me, humans know about psychological trauma. We also know about survival. Sometimes they're the same thing." As she worked, the other officers watched in fascination and horror. Hannah's plan didn't just accept the station's destruction. It embraced it, transformed it, turned catastrophic failure into salvation. She recruited engineers from multiple species, assigning tasks that played to each species' strengths while violating nearly every standard protocol they knew. Hours passed. The station groaned as quantum fractures spread through its superstructure. But instead of fighting the destruction, Hannah's team was carefully channeling it, using the growing instabilities to charge the emergency teleport systems. "This isn't just engineering," Vexcor observed quietly to Lyrax. "This is evolution in action. She's treating the entire station like a living thing, letting it adapt through its own destruction." Lyrax's colors shifted to indicate agreement. "Humans don't see destruction the way we do. For them, it's transformative." With 1 hour remaining, Hannah gathered the station's population in the designated teleport zones. The quantum fractures had reached critical levels, and the station's superstructure was beginning to tear itself apart. "Now we wait," Hannah said, her calmness somehow more terrifying than the chaos around them. "When the structure fails, the energy release will power the teleport. One perfect moment of destruction and creation." "And if your calculations are wrong?" Vexcor asked. Hannah's smile was gentle but unsettling. "Then we die knowing we tried something extraordinary." That's a very human way to go. The station's final moments were both horrifying and beautiful. As the quantum fractures reached critical mass, the accumulated energy surged through Hannah's modified systems. The teleport activated precisely as the station began to tear itself apart, using the very energy of its destruction to save its population. When the rescue ships arrived 40 hours later, they found 30,000 survivors safely transported to a nearby habitable moon, along with enough salvaged station components to build emergency shelters. The impossible had been accomplished by doing everything wrong in exactly the right way. Lyrax's report to the Galactic Council was both triumphant and troubled. "Today we witnessed human crisis response in its purest form. They do not merely survive disasters. They reshape them, redirect them, transform them into tools of salvation. Most disturbing of all, they appear to have an instinctive gift for this transformation, as if their entire evolutionary history has prepared them to turn destruction into creation. The galaxy had already feared human adaptability and engineering. Now they had reason to fear human crisis management as well. For what could stand against a species that had learned to use catastrophe itself as a path to survival? The distress signal echoed across the Proxima Nebula, a desperate plea from a crashed survey ship. For 3 days, the galaxy's finest search and rescue teams had failed to locate the wreckage on a hostile moon that defied their most advanced scanning technology. Then Earth sent Alex Reeves, and everything changed. High Commanders Nurks of the Galactic Search and Rescue Corps watched in disbelief as the human tracker worked. Alex moved through the toxic landscape wearing nothing but a basic environment suit, studying signs invisible to both alien eyes and advanced sensors. There, Alex said, crouching to examine what appeared to be undisturbed stone. The ship passed this way, low altitude, trailing plasma. Impossible, declared Xenerks, their crystalline sensory arrays scanning the area. There's no energy signature, no debris pattern, no. Look at the lichen, Alex interrupted, pointing to microscopic growths on the rocks, slightly scorched on one side. And these mineral formations, they've been subjected to heat stress in a specific direction. The ship went that way, losing altitude. The rescue team followed as Alex read the landscape like a book written in a language only humans could understand. Every broken twig, every displaced stone, every subtle change in the local flora told a story. It was tracking on a level that bordered on the supernatural. How? Asked Senior Medic Vivalera, their tentacles writhing in confusion. Our bioscanners show nothing. Alex smiled, though there was nothing humorous about the expression. Humans have been reading landscapes since before we had tools. We learned to track prey that could kill us, predators that hunted us, and other humans who might help or harm us. It's not about technology. It's about understanding patterns. They crossed a ridge, and Alex stopped suddenly, head tilted. Do you smell that? None of the alien team members had detected anything unusual, their sophisticated environmental sensors reporting normal atmospheric conditions. But Alex was already moving, following some invisible trail with unwavering confidence. The crash victims will be suffering from exposure, Alex explained while walking. Their bodies will be releasing specific stress chemicals. The local vegetation absorbs these chemicals, slightly altering their normal biochemical processes. Follow the changes in the plant life, and you find the survivors. Commander Xenerx's crystalline form flickered with disturbance. You can track biochemical changes in alien plants caused by the presence of stressed alien life forms. All life leaves traces, Alex replied, never breaking stride. Humans learned to read these traces because our survival depended on it. We're not just looking for signs, we're reading stories written in the environment itself. The revelation sent ripples of unease through the alien rescue team. They had known humans were adaptable, but this was different. This was evidence of perceptual abilities that transcended technological advancement. 3 hours later, they found the crash site. The survivors were alive, protected by emergency shields that had hidden them from conventional sensors. Alex had tracked them through a toxic wasteland using nothing but human senses and millennia of evolutionary experience. As the rescue ships arrived, Commander Xenerx approached Alex privately. Your tracking abilities, they go beyond physical signs, don't they? Alex nodded, watching as the survivors were evacuated. Humans are pattern recognition machines. We don't just see what's there. We see what's missing, what's changed, what doesn't fit. Every environment tells a story if you know how to read it. And your species learned this. Hunting. Hunting. Being hunted. Exploring. Surviving. Alex's eyes scanned the horizon, automatically cataloging details. Earth shaped us into predators who can think like prey and prey who can think like predators. We never stop reading the signs around us. Commander Xerxes' report to the Galactic Council that evening was troublingly brief. Humans possess tracking abilities that transcend technological assistance. They can read environmental changes on a level that suggests an almost supernatural connection to their surroundings. Most disturbing, they appear to apply these abilities instinctively across any environment, even alien ones they've never encountered before. The implications were clear and terrifying. The galaxy had feared human adaptability, engineering, and crisis management. Now they had to fear human perceptual abilities as well. For what could hide from a species that had evolved to read the very language of survival itself? In the days that followed, requests for human trackers flooded the Earth Embassy. But the galaxy's fascination was tinged with deep unease. They had discovered yet another aspect of humanity that defied conventional understanding: the ability to turn an entire hostile environment into a map leading to their goal. As Alex departed for the next mission, several alien observers noted how the humans seemed to absorb every detail of their surroundings without conscious effort. It was a stark reminder that humans hadn't just survived Earth's challenges. They had learned to read the very poetry of survival in the harshest conditions the galaxy could offer. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for one purpose: to address the human question. Recent events had forced the galaxy's leading species to confront an uncomfortable truth about their newest members. Dr. Xytel, the foremost cynobiologist in known space, stood before the assembled representatives of 5,000 civilizations. The massive chamber hummed with tension as her holographic displays activated. "Distinguished colleagues," she began, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed deep concern, "our latest research into human biology has revealed something unprecedented. They are not merely another adaptive species. They are evolution itself given consciousness." The chamber erupted in murmurs and electromagnetic pulses of alarm. On the central display, human DNA sequences rotated slowly, highlighted sections pulsing with unusual patterns. "Observe," Dr. Xytel continued. "Most species evolve through random mutation over generations. Humans actively prompt their own evolution through deliberate exposure to stress. Their DNA contains what we're calling adaptive triggers, sequences that activate rapid microevolution in response to environmental challenges." The Arcturian ambassador, a being of pure energy, pulsed forward. "Explain these triggers in terms of practical impact." Dr. Xytel highlighted specific genetic sequences. When humans face a new challenge, their bodies don't just adapt temporarily. They begin implementing permanent changes. Every stress, every survival situation, every new environment they encounter rewrites their genetic code in real time. They pass these changes to their offspring, but not as fixed traits, as adaptive potential. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. In essence, humans don't just learn from their experiences. They encode those lessons into their very DNA, not as solutions, but as possibilities. Each generation is born not just with their parents' adaptations, but with the ability to adapt even further. The council chamber fell silent as the data scrolled across multiple displays. It showed humans surviving in conditions that should have been lethal, solving problems that should have been impossible, perceiving patterns that should have been invisible. But surely there are limits. The Proximan delegate's voice carried a note of desperate hope. "That's the most disturbing part," Dr. Xytel replied. "We haven't found them. Every time we think we've identified a human limitation, they find a way to push past it. They actively seek out challenges that should destroy them, deliberately expose themselves to hostile conditions, purposely engage with problems that appear unsolvable." She brought up new displays showing human psychological patterns. Most species evolve to avoid stress. Humans evolve by pursuing it. They don't just survive challenges, they actively search for new ones. It's as if their entire species is engaged in a continuous, self-directed evolution. The High Counselor of the Rigel Collective spoke next, their quantum matrix vibrating with concern. You're suggesting they're not just adapting to their environment. They're adapting their environment to themselves while simultaneously adapting themselves to face even greater challenges, Dr. Seattle confirmed. It's a feedback loop of continuous advancement. Every problem they solve makes them better at solving problems. Every survival situation makes them better at surviving. Every limit they push expands their ability to push limits. The displays showed human achievements across multiple fields: engineering, crisis management, tracking, problem solving. Each example demonstrated not just success, but evolution in action. This is why their technology seems chaotic to us, Dr. Seattle explained. Why their solutions often appear to break conventional rules. They're not following a linear path of advancement. They're exploring every possible direction simultaneously, treating failure itself as just another path to success. The chamber erupted in concerned discussion. Species that had taken millions of years to reach their current state watched videos of humans making evolutionary leaps in single generations. There's more, Dr. Seattle said, her form dimming slightly. We've discovered that human creativity, their ability to imagine new possibilities, directly influences their adaptive potential. They don't just react to challenges. They imagine solutions that don't yet exist, and their bodies begin adapting to make those solutions possible. The implications were staggering. A species that could direct its own evolution through sheer force of will and imagination. A species that treated every failure as a step toward success, every challenge as an opportunity for advancement, every limitation as a temporary obstacle. In conclusion, Dr. Seattle said, humans represent something entirely new in our galaxy. They are not just another species. They are evolution achieving consciousness and turning its power upon itself. They don't just participate in the process of natural selection. They actively direct it. Her final words hung in the chamber like a prophecy. We must decide now how to proceed, knowing that everything we do, every limitation we try to impose, every challenge we present, will only make them stronger. For the first time in galactic history, we face a species that does not merely adapt to survive. They survive to adapt. The Council's decision that day was unanimous but heavy with implications. Humanity would not be contained or restricted. Such attempts would only accelerate their evolution. Instead, the galaxy would have to evolve itself, learning to coexist with a species that transformed every obstacle into an opportunity, every failure into a stepping stone, and every challenge into a chance for advancement. The galaxy had feared human adaptability, engineering, crisis management, and perception. Now they understood the truth. These were merely symptoms of something far more profound. They had encountered a species that had made evolution itself into a tool of conscious advancement, and nothing would ever be the same again.